Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 70 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation M.E.S.S.A.G.E. We begin this segment with number 2 sitting by a campfire, and we see that number 2 is wearing some Wild West themed articles of clothing along with his usual outfit. Number 2 also provides some narration where he talks about the Kids Next Door Bologna Express, a delivery system that allows note passing to occur in school without said note passing being caught. We quickly find out that number 2's campfire is in the middle of a hallway in Gallagher Elementary School, and Principal Sauerbraten is not happy about it, to say the least. Number 2 calmly responds that he was having some vittles, and he goes off on a tangent about how Vittles' spelling and pronunciation are different from each other. This becomes a running gag throughout the segment. Number 2 also mentions that he's on his way to the office of Eggbert Eggleston, the 4th grade class president, because he has been given a mission that relates to the Kids Next Door Bologna Express in some way. So number 2 boards a 2x4 technology vehicle that resembles a wooden horse. He calls the vehicle Old Rickety, and then number 2 heads off for Egbert's office. At the 4th grade class president's office, Wilson Woodrow explains to number 2 that Egbert's note to Muffy Jenkins is to be delivered to Muffy before lunchtime is over, and number 2 assures Wilson that he hasn't missed a delivery in all the time that he's provided service for the Kids Next Door Bologna Express. When number 2 leaves the office, though, Wilson comments to himself about how number 2 hasn't missed a delivery yet. When number 2 exits Egbert's office, he sees 3 members of the 6 Gum gang standing in the hallway: Runt, Lunk, and Goof. Number 2 has a look on his face that indicates that he's suspicious about why these members of the 6 Gum gang are hanging around in the hallway just outside of Egbert's office. But the only acknowledgement that number 2 and the 6 Gum gang give to each other is when Runt silently tips his hat to number 2, and number 2 silently tips his hat back, although number 2 still has that look on his face indicating that he thinks that trouble might be happening soon. But in any case, number 2 boards Old Rickety and then heads off to deliver the note to Muffy. Shortly after number 2 leaves, Wilson exits the 4th grade class president office, and he whispers something into Runt's ear. Runt, Lunk, and Goof then proceed to chase after number 2. Number 2 suspects that the 6 Gum gang members are trying to stop him from delivering Egbert's note to Muffy, so number 2 tries all sorts of tactics and maneuvers to evade these 3 members of the 6 Gum gang. Number 2 is able to stop Lunk and Goof, but Runt continues to pursue number 2, and number 2 figures that his best chance of getting Runt off his trail is to head into a room that Runt wouldn't think to go to, and number 2 decides to head into the gym. And sure enough, Runt doesn't follow after number 2, but Runt comments to himself that number 2 won't make it out of the gym easily, if at all. And we then get to head into the gym, and we see that it looks like a barren wasteland canyon. That's the best way I can think to describe Gallagher Elementary School's gym. But number 2 isn't in the gym for too long because he's quickly ambushed by several individuals that we don't get a clear look at just yet. When number 2 regains consciousness, he finds himself tied up to a chair, and this chair is standing on top of several strands of rope, which are over a pit full of glue or paste. Number 2 also finds out that he's in a kindergarten classroom, and several kindergartners are sitting in a circle around the pit of glue or paste. And one of the kindergartners is playing a game of Duck, Duck, Goose. Whenever this kindergartner chooses another kindergartner to be the goose, that kindergartner cuts a strand of the rope. So in other words, when this game of Duck, Duck, Goose is over, all the strands of rope will be cut and number 2 will fall into the pit of glue or paste. Number 2's narration explains that this group of kindergartners call themselves the Crayon Tribe, and they're not particularly forgiving if they find any older students in areas of the school that they consider to be their territory. The kindergartner who is choosing who is the duck and who is the goose in the Duck, Duck, Goose game calls himself Sits in Corner, and yes, he's very adamant that number 2 pay for trespassing on their territory. But some other kindergartners arrive and try to, another kindergartner arrives and she tells Sits in Corner that number 2 hasn't done anything wrong. And she also brings this to the attention of the Crayon Tribe chief. Sits in Corner brings up how number 2 was trespassing on their territory, and we do hear, the Crayon Tribe chief at first thinks that James Nixon McGarfield and some of his associates are going to cause trouble for them because he brings up an incident where some 4th graders had stolen milk money from some kindergartners and gave them atomic wedgies. Number 2 quickly tells the Crayon Tribe chief that Eggbert Eggleston is now the 4th grade class president. James Nixon McGarfield is currently in permanent detention after he turned to the dark side. The Crayon Tribe chief actually knows about Eggbert. He comments about how his dad and Egbert's dad are friends with each other, and he also mentions how Egbert's dad treated the soccer team that the Crayon Tribe chief mentions how Egbert's dad had treated the soccer team that the Crayon Tribe chief is a part of to some ice cream after some soccer practice. Sits in Corner is still insistent that they not show any mercy towards number 2 because he thinks that this means that the 4th graders will still try to cause trouble. Sits in Corner thinks that they need to set an example with number 2, but the Crayon Tribe chief responds that, that they can't hide from the older students forever and thinks that it might be a good idea to actually try and befriend older students and try to make peace. So the Crayon Tribe chief tells some of the other Crayon Tribe members to let number 2 go. But Sits in Corner has a notably angry expression on his face. Number 2 manages to exit the gym, and he's briefly out in the playground before he heads to another doorway back into Gallagher Elementary School. Runt is outside looking over the playground from a hill, and Runt comments about how he's finally found number 2 again, and then proceeds to chase after number 2 once again. Number 2 comments about how his meeting with the kindergartners took some time away from lunch period, but he thinks he'll still be able to make it to Muffy's table in the cafeteria and give her the note before lunchtime is over. But just when number 2 is, when number 2 is just outside of the cafeteria, he's stopped by a trap that was set by Sits in Corner. And Sits in Corner prepares to attack number 2, saying he doesn't care what the Crayon Tribe chief says, he still doesn't trust any 4th graders. But before Sits in Corner can actually attack number 2, Runt interferes. Runt grabs Sits in Corner, and he demands Sits in Corner's milk money, and he also brings up that he was the one who gave Sits in Corner an atomic wedgie once in the past, while also stealing his milk money in the past beforehand. So after Runt takes Sits in Corner's milk money, number 2 manages to get up, and number 2 demands that Runt returns the milk money. Runt responds, "What does it matter to number 2? Sits in Corner is just some kindergartner," but number 2 reiterates that Runt should return the milk money. Runt still refuses, so number 2 and Runt are about to have a shoot-off, but Runt manages to use his chewing gum gun in order to knock number 2's weapon out of his hand. And Runt is about to bring up about Runt then says that he's going to Runt says he's going to mention something about the note that number 2 is supposed to deliver, but before Runt can finish his sentence, Sits in Corner managed to knock Runt out while Runt was distracted with number 2. Number 2 thanks Sits in Corner for the help, and Sits in Corner admits that he was wrong to make sweeping generalizations about all 4th graders because of his bad experiences with bad 4th graders. And number 2 gets the milk money from the unconscious Runt, and he offers it back to Sits in Corner. But Sits in Corner insists that number 2 should keep it and use it for victuals, because number 2 brought up the victuals when he was in the kindergarten classroom. Number 2 thanks Sits in Corner and bids him farewell. Number 2 then enters the cafeteria, and he finds the table that Muffy is sitting at, but we, the viewers, don't get to see Muffy's face. Number 2 is worried that he must have lost the note during the delivery process, but then Runt regains consciousness and he enters the cafeteria. And Runt reveals that the reason he and 2 other members of the 6 Gum Gang were chasing after number 2 is because number 2 forgot the note in Egbert's office. Number 2 admits he thought he might have forgotten something, and Runt angrily responds that number 2 forgot his brain before he storms off. So number 2 now has the note, and he gives the note to Muffy before he leaves. So Muffy looks at the note, but we, the viewers, see the note through Muffy's perspective. So we still don't get to see Muffy's face, but we do get to see what's on the note. And Egbert's note to Muffy is, the note indicates Eggbert telling Muffy that the splinter cell is real. But Muffy claims that it's nothing important when one of her friends inquires her about what's on the note. And Muffy also insists that Eggbert is just a weird kid or something along those lines. Next up is the end credits scene, which shows us a montage of number 2, Wilson Woodrow, and Eggbert Eggleston meeting with the Crayon tribe of kindergartners. And the montage shows Eggbert and the Crayon tribe chief working out a treaty, and we get to see the kindergartners and the 4th graders have formed an alliance through this treaty, and that's how we end this segment. So this segment is, an interesting detail about this segment is this segment actually originated as a comics issue. This was an issue from the Cartoon Network comics, and that it was eventually adapted into a segment on the TV series. I do remember reading this particular comics issue, but it was a while. It was quite a while, so there might be a few details that are a little foggy, but from what I can remember about the comics issue, from what I remember about the comics issue, the segment version, the TV show version of this entry, did expand upon a few things. Or the comics issue was shorter, and the TV series expanded on a few details from what I remember. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the comics issue didn't feature the scenes involving the kindergartners. I think that was just in the TV series. And I don't believe that the note was actually shown in the, or if I remember correctly, I don't think the comics issue actually revealed what Eggbert wrote on his note to Muffy. So it's only in the TV show version, I believe, that actually shows us what's written on the note, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, a few details were expanded, and I guess I should bring this up now, but there's another entry in season 6 that actually originated as a story in Cartoon Network's comics, and that also got adapted into a segment on the TV series. We'll be sure to cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. But yes, this is the first of 2 comics stories that were adapted into segments on the TV series. Now, another detail that's worth mentioning is, yes, I believe this is the first entry in Codename Kids Next Door that clarifies that kindergartners attend Gallagher Elementary School. And I remember this caught my attention when I would first watch this segment, because at least when I was in elementary school and when I was in kindergarten, the kindergartners actually had a separate building from the elementary school students. But nowadays, the area where I went to school with now has kindergartners share the same building with elementary school students. Well, 1st through 4th graders. We used to have the 1st and 5th graders in the same building, but now the 5th graders and the 6th graders are in the same building, while the 1st through 4th graders and the kindergartners are in the same building. So, yeah, that was a change. That was a change that happened long after I had graduated from school, but I do remember finding that surprising because, like I said, kindergartners had their own building when I was in kindergarten and when I was in elementary school. But I guess it goes to show that things can change over the course of time. And I did know about other locations nearby that did have kindergartners and elementary school students share the same building. So, it does go to show how different people can have different reference pools. And although it wasn't the main focus for this segment, there still was the lesson about not making sweeping generalizations about an entire group because of the bad behavior or the misdeeds of bad members of a group. That was the case with Sits and Corner. Sits and Corner refused to consider the possibility of there being any good 4th graders because of his bad experiences with 4th graders, but by the end of the segment, he did realize that not all 4th graders were bad, and that it was wrong for him to act like all 4th graders were bad just because of his bad experiences with bad 4th graders. So, again, it wasn't really the main focus of the segment, but yeah, the whole lesson about don't make sweeping generalizations about a group because of bad experiences from members of that group is an important lesson. So, yeah, it was a small detail, but I still appreciated that lesson was being acknowledged. Otherwise, I guess the other big details to talk about for this segment is how it turns out that 3 members of the 6th Gum Gang were actually not trying to antagonize Number 2. They were simply trying to give Number 2 the note because Number 2 actually forgot the note in the office. So, yeah, it was one of those cases where the usual villains in the series actually weren't actively trying to be villains in the series. They were actually trying to help Number 2. Although, I would say it's not hard to understand, it's not hard to understand why Number 2 would think that they were trying to stop him, considering that the 6th Gum Gang have a track record of antagonizing the kids next door, especially because they are affiliated with the delightful children from down the lane in particular among their various enemies. And yeah, I think Runt probably should have let off with "You Forgot the Note." A part of me gets the feeling that if Runt let off when trying to get Number 2 to stop, if he let off with "You Forgot the Note" in the office, then they probably could have avoided a lot of the trouble that ended up happening. And at the same time, Runt also didn't do himself any favors when he decided to have a kick the dog moment towards Sits and Corner. So again, it's not hard to understand why Number 2 didn't think that the 6th Gum Gang were trying to help him. And while I'm thinking about it though, although this is another lesson about how poor communication can cause problems for a lot of people. But others have pointed out that there actually was a silver lining to this confusion. because this led to number 2 crossing paths with the kindergartners, well, at least the Crayon tribe of kindergartners anyway. And number 2 was able to tell the Crayon tribe chief that Eggbert Eggleston is now the 4th grade class president. And like the end credits scene indicated, the 4th graders and the kindergartners, at least the Crayon tribe of kindergartners, were able to work out a treaty where they formed an alliance with each other. So something good did come out of this confusion. And that also, I guess, is an important lesson in life, too. Sometimes things might not go the way you... sometimes complications can happen in life, but sometimes those complications can lead to good things happening still. So I thought that was another good lesson, too, for this particular segment. Now, the other detail, though, is Egbert's note to Muffy. Eggbert is warning Muffy that the Splinter Cell is real. Now, without giving too much away, just for the sake of those who might just be following along with these recap and thoughts videos, or if you've just been watching Season 6 in order so far without any real knowledge of how Season 6 or Codename Kids Next Door ends, let's just say you already have met the Splinter Cell. That's my little clue about the Splinter Cell for now. But yes, exactly how Eggbert and Muffy relate to the Splinter Cell, or what is the information about the Splinter Cell, what's the importance of the Splinter Cell to Eggbert and Muffy, that doesn't get answered. I don't believe supplementary material ever answered that, and at least in the series itself, they never answer why Eggbert or Muffy would be aware of the Splinter Cell and why it would be important for them to know about the Splinter Cell. But some fans have speculated that maybe the sequel series or the spin-off series, if it ever does get greenlit, that is, might reveal that detail, or that might shed some light on why Eggbert and Muffy would know about the Splinter Cell and why it's important to them. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see if that sequel series or spin-off series ever does see the light of day. So otherwise, that might be about it, actually. So this segment gave number 2 a prevalent role, or number 2 was the spotlight character for this particular segment. This was also the first of 2 segments that were adapted from comics stories. And we also did get some lessons about how poor communication can cause a lot of complications, but sometimes complications in life can lead to good things happening. And there's also the lesson about don't judge an entire group because of the misdemeanors of bad members of the group. And like I said, the Splinter Cell does tease about something important throughout the note about the Splinter Cell teases about something important in the season, but exactly how the Splinter Cell relates to Eggbert and Muffy remains unclear. And that's probably something that some fan works are going to try and I wouldn't be surprised if some fan works try to figure out or offer possible explanations for what the Splinter Cell might mean to Muffy or Eggbert. Otherwise, I would say that's about it for now. So, as of this video, we've now discussed the B segment of episode 70 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.